Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. On December 14, 1974, Steelers linebacker Jack Ham just got done playing in the final game of the regular season. And he was so disgusted by the game and by what he just saw that he said in the post-game press conference, quite bluntly, "I hated this game. I'm just glad it's over." Without any context whatsoever, how badly do you think the Steelers lost? Did they get blown out? Not quite. Did they lose a close game in the final seconds or get screwed over by the referees? Nope. Maybe they won a close game against a bad team that they should have won by way more against, and Ham was disgusted at the effort levels and felt that his team was sleepwalking. If you guess that option, you're still wrong. Because with the appropriate context, you'll realize that Ham said this quote because the game was too easy. In 1974, to close out the regular season, the Pittsburgh Steelers won a game so convincingly that everyone on the team was disgusted at just how easy it was, to the point where they were legitimately angry about this walk in the park. And this is the story behind the easiest game in Steelers history. Before I talk about the game, we need some context about the 1974 season for both teams involved in this matchup. Our story revolves around two bitter rivals from the AFC Central, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Entering 1974, both of these franchises were pretty similar in terms of their historical success. Despite neither side doing much of anything before the merger, but the Bengals obviously had less time to work with than the Steelers, once the 70s rolled around, these two teams established themselves consistently as some of the top teams in the conference. Cincinnati had won 2 AFC Central crowns in the first 4 years, while Pittsburgh, after winning the AFC Central in 1972, made the postseason as a wild card in 1973. By the mid-70s, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh were consistently projected to be among the top teams in the conference, and at the very least the two favorites each year to win the AFC Central. And entering Week 9 of the 1974 season, when the teams met for the first time, they were squaring off at Riverfront Stadium in a monumental game. Pittsburgh was 6-1-1, while Cincinnati was 5-3. If the Steelers won, then with 4 games to go and a 2.5-game lead over Cincy, they had pretty much locked the division up. If the Bengals won, then it was a whole new ballgame. With everything to play for on this November day, the Bengals defended their home field and won the game 17-10. Ken Anderson had arguably the best game of his entire career, going 20 for 22 and completing an unbelievable 91% of his passes at a time where the league average was less than 53%. Cincinnati's pass defense, which earlier in the season held the Browns to just 3 net passing yards, came to play in this one as well, with Terry Bradshaw going 13 for 35 with no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 37.8. which is worse than if you did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. After this game, which was the true definition of a statement game, the Bengals were now just half a game back of the Steelers for the AFC Central crown, and they owned the tiebreaker. The teams were going to meet on the final week of the season, and everyone was circling that matchup as being the game to decide the division. Unfortunately, as the next month of the season played itself out, it didn't quite work out that way. For Pittsburgh, this first game against the Bengals was nothing more than a bump in the road. They would immediately bounce back, defeating the Cleveland Browns on the road, and then blowing out the New Orleans Saints the week after that on Monday Night Football. Over their next 4 games, the Steelers went 3-1, and looked like the dominant team in the AFC. They bounced back because of their suffocating defense, which forced 14 turnovers in their 3 wins in that stretch, including 7 in that game against the Cleveland Browns. As for Cincinnati, not so much. If there was any theme to describe the Bengals at the end of the 1974 season, it was injuries. Because for that final month leading up to the finale against Pittsburgh, the Bengals got absolutely decimated by the injury bug. Head coach Paul Brown said that he couldn't remember the last time he'd seen so many people injured, and said quite bluntly, "We're hurting." Starting fullback Boobie Clark, who had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage as a rookie in 1973, and was on pace to accomplish this feat again in 1974, missed the rest of the season with a broken arm. Bill Elliott, the backup running back, sprained his ankle and missed some time as well. Essex Johnson, coming off of back-to-back seasons with 1,000 yards from scrimmage, missed the second half of the season with a knee injury. Cincinnati had no running game whatsoever. And if that wasn't bad enough, entering that final week against the Steelers in Week 14, they were about to have no passing game. A big reason why the Bengals were competitive throughout most of the 1974 season, in spite of their terrible injury luck, was because of their quarterback and arguably the greatest player who is inexplicably not in the Hall of Fame right now, Ken Anderson. I don't know how he didn't make the Pro Bowl in 1974, because you can make a legitimate argument that he was the best quarterback in all of football. He led the league in passing yards with 2,667. He led the league by completing 64.9% of his passes. When you consider the fact that Bob Greasy was the only other quarterback that season To complete more than 59% of his passes, to be completing them at a 65% rate back in 1974 is absurdly good. He led the league with a passer rating of 95.7, and he was 5th in touchdown passes thrown with 18. Anderson was an absolute star for the Bengals, and sure enough, he was about to get hurt as well. In a 23-19 loss to the Detroit Lions, Anderson would be knocked out with back spasms, and would be ruled out for the team's Week 14 finale. The 1974 Bengals were a good team who just couldn't stay healthy, and it showed as they dropped 3 of their final 4 games before the season finale. The Steelers-Bengals finale was supposed to be the AFC Central clincher. Instead, because the Bengals just fell off a cliff, it was a meaningless game, as the Steelers had won the AFC Central by this point, and the Bengals had nothing to play for, unable to get the low wildcard spot in the conference. The mindset for the Bengals entering this finale was simple: just get the heck out of there and get this season over with. And with that, we go to the easiest game in Steelers history. December 14th, 1974, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the Cincinnati Bengals in the final game of the regular season. I cannot emphasize this enough. The game was completely meaningless for both teams. Cincinnati had nothing to play for. Pittsburgh had nothing to play for. There was no seeding back then, so no matter what happened, the winner of the AFC Central would play the wild card. Pittsburgh had clinched the Central, and Buffalo had clinched the wild card. So this game was merely just to finish out the regular season. Cincinnati was starting Wayne Clark at quarterback in place of the injured Anderson. He was terrible, going 3 for 8 with 23 yards passing, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 6.2. Keep in mind that one of his passes went for 18 yards, meaning that if you take that one play out of the game, Clark threw for 5 yards. Bruce Kozlov was the only receiver on the Bengals to even catch a pass for positive yardage. Even though Cincinnati trailed for the entire game, they refused to go to the air. They just ran the ball and killed as much clock as possible. The offense got nothing going all day, and they had a grand total of 0 plays that went for 20+ yards. This game was the definition of total domination. Terry Bradshaw threw 2 touchdown passes and no picks, while posting a 135.3 passer rating. The Steelers averaged over 4.6 yards per carry. The Steelers outgained the Bengals by over 160 yards of total offense. And keep in mind that Pittsburgh was playing its backups for most of the second half. Bradshaw got yanked midway through the game. Reggie Harrison, a running back with 1 career carry before this game, scored a touchdown and got a considerable workload in the second half. Pittsburgh jumped out to an early 7-0 lead in the first quarter, led 17-0 at the half, and then won convincingly, taking it 27-3. This should have been a celebratory occasion for the Steelers, right? They beat a division rival. They got revenge on the team that beat them earlier in the season, and they had tons of momentum going into the postseason now, having won 4 of their last 5 games and having absolutely destroyed Cincinnati in this one. Nobody should be angry or upset, right? Turns out that was not the case, because the Steelers were actually so angry at Cincinnati and lashed out in the post-game press conference about the game being too easy. After the game, despite the Steelers playing well, most of the Steelers' talk in the post-game press conference was about the Bengals. I want to emphasize this before going any further. The Steelers played well. This was not the case of a team winning the game on virtue of being more talented, but not playing well and just going through the motions or getting lucky. Chuck Noll even praised his team heavily, saying that he was pleased with the effort and that his guys played with enthusiasm. So if you think this is something like when college players and coaches are angry at not playing their best against an FCS school, it was not that at all. Despite that, the players were still furious. Linebacker Jack Ham said that despite the team dominating the Bengals, he hated the game. He accused Paul Brown of not caring, and said that he was glad that the game was over. Terry Bradshaw was puzzled at Cincinnati's strategy of not throwing the football, saying that it was odd that the team just decided to not throw the ball after being so successful at it all season. Joe Green was angry at the Bengals' game plan too, and said the Bengals still have to look in the mirror in the offseason and say, "I'm not as good as those guys." The sentiment was that this game did absolutely nothing to prepare the Steelers for the wildcard meeting against Buffalo, and they were angry at Cincinnati because they expected way more of a fight than what was given to them. As for what happened to the Steelers the rest of the season, well, they dominated their way through the postseason. They destroyed Buffalo in the wildcard round, winning at 32-14 after leading by 4 possessions at the half. They beat the Oakland Raiders in the AFC Championship by double digits after coming back to score 21 points in the fourth quarter. And at Super Bowl IX, they defeated the Minnesota Vikings, with the defense playing lights out, allowing just 9 first downs and 119 yards of total offense while forcing 5 turnovers. So as it turns out, the fact that they thought an NFL game was too easy for them turned out to be a pretty big sign that they were just that good, and were on a collision course to win their first title in franchise history. Whenever a team blows out another team and dominates, 99.9% of the time, it is a joyous occasion. It's a culmination of all the hard work that went into practicing and game planning and executing everything. It's always a great thing to destroy another team and showcase your domination and build momentum off of that, especially against a division rival. But in 1974, the Steelers were angry at the Bengals for letting it happen. And with all of that context in mind, in the near 90-year history of the Steelers and the thousands of games played by the franchise, this one against the Bengals might have been the easiest game in franchise history. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, follow me on TikTok at JRGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.